Hello and welcome to a special episode of History Bubble, where I will look at the aftermath of the Armenian genocide as seen from the Turkish national movement's perspective. So first, some quick background, and if you want to know more, check out these 3 videos covering what led up to the genocide and its aftermath for the continuation of the empire, and the last one being on the newly formed Armenian nation after the World War. So the Ottoman Empire had just lost the First World War, and with that most of the territory. During the war, they had also carried out mass deportations and massacres of Armenians, almost ridding them from Cilicia and eastern Anatolia, their traditional homeland. This was mostly at the hands of the Ottoman leading party, the Committee of Union and Progress, or KAP, their leaders, the 3 Pashas, and their militia forces, the Special Organization. After the war, KAP was dissolved and a new cabinet was formed in Istanbul as the continuation of the Ottoman Empire, but they were under the occupation of the Allied powers that had won the war, and the revolutionaries called the Turkish National Movement, with their leader, the war hero Mustafa Kemal, later Ataturk, which had control over most of Anatolia, not occupied by the foreign powers. The Istanbul government, partly due to foreign pressure, wanted to try the war criminals and compensate the surviving deportees, but this was hard seeing that they did not control all of their country. So what this video will explore is what the national movement's stance on the genocide was and how they looked at the perpetrators. After the World War, the Allies occupied much of Anatolia, but at first found little resistance, as the Turkish national movement believed in the Allies in the former statements of a people's right to self-determination, and now that Turkey only controlled the regions with a Turkish majority, except maybe some Kurdish areas, they should by this principle keep their land. This principle of keeping the Turks' lands for themselves was of utmost importance to the Turkish national movement. To achieve this goal, they would do anything, but preferably it would be a peaceful way. One of the things they tried to do was to get the Americans to put a mandate on them, even if this would give them less self-determination in the short term. In the long run, it seemed like the best option, although this proposal was declined by the Americans. They also proposed that the British would occupy the regions, which at the time were controlled by the Greeks, as they knew if the Greeks continued to occupy it, conflict would break out. But this was also denied. They even at first wanted the perpetrators of the genocide to be punished, although the sense of who these perpetrators were was a bit smaller than others, saying that only parts of the wartime leadership of KAP were responsible. The national movement also tried to stay as far away from the Unionists as possible, often renouncing KAP and their policies. Although their criticism was mainly focused on the idea of tyrannism rather than the annihilalistic policies, this rejection of KAP was mostly of their ideology rather than its member, as many of them had joined the national movement. They even tried to recruit more members from those in prison in Istanbul and Malta for their actions during the war. Some working on the ground for the 3 Pashas after the war also later joined the national movement. But everything changed when the Treaty of Sevres was signed. This treaty decided that Anatolia should be divided by the victorious powers. Now the nationalist outlook upon punishing the war criminals and the genocide as a whole shifted dramatically. They stopped all actions trying to punish the war criminals, and attitudes towards the Armenians and Greeks became even more hostile, as it became known that they wanted to take territory from the Turks. War soon started between the nations, and thousands of massacres were committed as the respective armies entered villages with a different ethnic background. These massacres were committed by all sides, but the Turkish ones were the most prominent. Even though this is the case, it's still, according to me, wrong to call this a continuation of the genocide, as some do, as these were far less systematic than previously, and there was disagreement on how to act in the government. The people who supported or committed these massacres were often former KAP or Special Organization members. They often tried to use the massacres committed by the Armenians as a justification for this, and even justified the genocide by saying this. But there were still government representatives condemning these actions, some even calling for the execution of these individuals. The genocide also became of small concern when the war for the very survival and self-determination of the Turks was at stake. From official documents, you can get the feeling that they talked of the genocide much as we do today, as old history. As soon as the topic was brought up, it soon branched out to the current conflict and the massacres, especially those committed by Armenians. It may seem strange that just a few years later, the leaders of the Turkish national movement and Mustafa Kemal, are key figures in the actions described, come to form a secular, semi-democratic state which became one of the most modern in the world. I really had no qualification to talk about this, so take it with many grains of salt. But here's what I think. The first thing to recognize is the importance of the perpetrators of the genocide in the independence war. These people were experienced fighters and statesmen in the country and were especially keen on fighting the current enemies, Armenians and Greeks, and if integrated into the movement could provide much needed support. This might have been seen as the only way to ensure victory, the self-determination of Turkey, and implementation of future policies. Hinting to that these people were mostly used as a tool is the sacking by Kemal of many of the former CUP members from the government as soon as independence war was over. But as I said, this is just speculation. So that was a brief overview on the Turkish national movement's outlook on the genocide and its aftermath in Anatolia. Next time I will talk about Soviet Armenia. I also wanted to thank everyone who subscribed because today we reached my first subscriber goal, 57 subscribers, which is the same as Pitcairn Islands, which is the smallest national jurisdiction in the world.